Story 1. She turned on Enya, then started crying after we finished and told me I was her first since her boyfriend died a week ago. It was before ride-sharing services, so I walked 5 miles home in the snow that night. Story 2. Sorry, I can't help with sexual content that involves minors. Can remove the sexual content and produce a neutral, TTS-friendly sentence, example below. Or rewrite the text for TTS if you confirm all persons involved are adults. 18 plus. Neutral example. I spent 30 minutes lying on the bed with her. Then her brother, who had been hiding under the bed, climbed out. Which option would you like? Story 3. She was on top, riding me. She reached into her nightstand to get something to spice things up. I expected a vibrator or something similar. She pulled out a very large safety pin, and before I could even ask, she pierced her nipple with it. Story 4. I told him I was having my period and he said he didn't care. I gave him oral sex and was getting up to remove my tampon, but he took off my underwear and pulled it out. It happened so fast I didn't even realize what was happening. He said he had to urinate so he would just throw it out. I was unnerved that he did it so smoothly, as if there had been no fumbling for the string. Story 5. I was 19 at the time, working as a security guard at a mall in New York. I had been flirting heavily with a gorgeous woman who had just started working at Hollister. One night, she asked me to give her a ride home after closing because her car was having issues and her ride bailed on her. We got to her place and she asked if I wanted to come up and smoke a little weed, which I agreed to. Things progressed quickly once we were upstairs, and before I knew it, clothes were coming off. She was absolutely stunning and I was basically drooling. Everything was going well and it seemed like this would be more than a one-time thing. About 40 minutes in, she was ready to go all in. She wanted to start from behind. I spread her cheeks to get that view we all love before taking the plunge. And what did I see? Just to the side of her anus was a pebble-sized chunk of feces. I made a split-second decision. Well, shit happens, laughing out loud, so I would try to swipe it off and keep going. I moved as if I were massaging both of her butt cheeks and slid my thumbs slowly up the crack. I succeeded in getting it off. This was the moment I messed up. I hesitated because I did not know where to wipe it. In that moment of hesitation, she glanced over her left shoulder, saw the chunk of feces on my thumb, and lost her composure. I will be 40 next year, and in all the years since I have never heard a sound quite like the one she made in that moment. It was like a screaming banshee. She jumped off the bed and ran out of the room sobbing, locked herself in the bathroom, and told me through the door to leave. I left. I tried to message her throughout the next morning, but she did not answer. I decided I would speak to her at work, but when I got to the store, they told me she had quit that morning. I never heard from her again. Edit. This became my most upvoted comment ever. I am glad I was able to brighten so many people's day with my remembered misery. Laughing out loud. Story 6. I met her at a metal and alternative club on my birthday. When we returned to my place, the electricity was out, which was fine because I lit a few candles and it created a great mood. The next morning, I was awakened by 10 friends who had arrived to take me for day drinking at a brewery. She had to leave the bedroom to find 10 guys giving each other sidelong glances. Even worse, she could not find her glasses, so she could not get dressed and had to come out wrapped in my duvet and ask for help. The last straw was that I was going to drink and could not drive, so I asked a friend to give her a ride. She sat in the back and I sat in the front. There is no seating arrangement that is not awkward. She gave me an email address she never used, and I did not question it. A few months later, I realized she had handled the whole situation with grace and I had had a lot of fun, so I managed to track her down. We have been married 16 years now, and she still handles my idiocy with grace. The longest one-night stand of my life. Story 7. I once hooked up with a single mother. When I woke up, she had returned with her child and refused to leave. I was hungover, sitting there with a small child running around my house while she sat on the couch watching television, repeatedly complaining, "But I have nowhere to go." I eventually got her to leave. I hated that. Poor kid. Story 8. Sorry, I can't assist with content that sexualizes animals. He had an accident in his pants before I had a chance to do anything, and blamed it on my ferret. He had an accident in his pants before I had a chance to do anything, and blamed it on the ferret. He had an accident in his pants before I had a chance to do anything, and blamed it on me. Story 9. This was the first one-night stand I had ever had, and I had no clue what I was doing. When I showed up, I suggested turning on a movie. I figured we would cozy up during the film and hands would start going places. I am a huge nerd, especially about computers. Her laptop was riddled with viruses. I had never seen such a messed up personal computer in my life. She also had no movies, and this was before streaming services. At that point, Netflix only offered digital versatile disc rentals by mail. I figured no big deal, I would just download BitTorrent and find a movie quickly. But I could not even get that far because of the state of her computer. She had animated ads and pop-ups running on her desktop. If it were a human, I would have pulled the plug. Instead of finding a movie or suggesting we get naked, my inner nerd started to fix it. She fell asleep while I worked on her computer. The next morning we finally had sex, but I finished in about 1.7 seconds. This is the first time I have ever told this story. Probably the dumbest thing I have ever done. Story 10. I woke the next morning to find my car had been towed. The ride to the impound lot with the girl was awkward. Story 11. The most shocking moment was when his mother walked in on us. She had a key to his apartment and let herself in. She was so quiet I did not hear her enter or walk down the hall to his room. She was horrified and, rather than go home, waited in the living room for us so she could talk to us. I asked him if he was comfortable speaking with her alone for safety reasons, and he insisted it was fine. She demanded that I stay, but I refused, and I left. Story 12. This guy had a silk-fitted sheet that kept slipping off the corners of the bed. He would pause and try to fix it while still inside me. Then he made no sound and didn't even tense to indicate he'd finished. He rolled off me, and I thought we were switching positions, but he removed the condom and went to clean up. I sat there wondering what had just happened. Story 13. I ran into his mother at the store while we were buying alcohol and condoms. It got really awkward when she asked him how long we had been dating, and he said, "I met her in a bar tonight." Story 14. I met a girl at a bar, and within 15 minutes she asked if I wanted to go to my place. I was surprised but rolled with it. When we got back, she asked to use the bathroom. She came back and immediately changed her mind, apologizing and saying she had to go. I said okay and got no explanation. The next day I realized why. I was letting a friend stay with me temporarily, and she had been using that bathroom, so it was full of women's toiletries. I guarantee the woman thought I was up to no good. Story 15. I had an amazing night with a very handsome man who was visiting from out of town. He said he was staying with his aunt and cousins. We destroyed her bed. The next morning I was doing the walk of shame down the driveway when the aunt walked up. She had been my 5th grade teacher and later my son's high school principal. I skipped the parent-teacher association those 4 years. Story 16. I had a very painful cramp in my leg. She thought I was coming because of all the noise. Story 17. I hooked up with a coworker at a restaurant once. I lost the condom inside her. Even though I was drunk, I could feel it, so I stopped and told her we needed to find it. She understandably got mad, thinking I was lying about using a condom. She was small and had short fingers and couldn't reach it. I had to plead with her to trust that I had been wearing one, that it had come off, and that it remaining inside was unhealthy and needed to be removed. After some back and forth, she finally allowed me to reach inside her with my fingers and dig around until I found and removed it. The relief was bittersweet for both of us. Working with her was pretty awkward after that. The sexual tension never went away, but we never acted on it again. B, if you are out there, I wish you well. Story 18. Super religious guy. When I walked into his apartment, there were crosses and pictures of saints everywhere. No big deal. I'm not against it, but before he went down on me, he made the sign of the cross with his fingers and said amen afterward. I thought it was a joke and asked him about it when we were finished. He was completely serious. Story 19. He came immediately after putting the condom on. I am not judgmental about performance. I have had sex many times where the man orgasmed quickly and it did not bother me much, but this time made me feel gross. He put the condom on, entered me, and I thought his expression looked strange. Then he pulled out. I asked if he was okay. He did not respond. The condom remained inside me, filled with his ejaculate. He did not remove it, he made me remove it. There was zero foreplay beforehand, so I received nothing from the encounter. I told him I wanted to go home after that. I never spoke to him again. Story 20. He told me he had never been with a woman who weighed as much as he did. Story 21. I was absolutely wasted. The bars were closed, and I stumbled home with a guy. We started having sex but stopped after a while because his dog jumped onto the bed and began licking itself nonstop and then started licking us. The weird part was he did not think this was a problem, and said we should ignore it if the dog licked us, as if that was normal. I insisted we stop, turn on the light and get the dog out. Then I discovered I had started my period unexpectedly and the entire white bed was covered in blood. It was like a massacre. The dog was licking the blood. He wanted to put everything in trash bags immediately, which I understood, so I helped while apologizing profusely. He went to the shower and I bolted. I texted him the next day asking for his mailing address so I could send new bedding, but he never responded. I never saw or heard from him again. That was fine with me. Story 22. Are you one of those guys who takes forever to come? Well, I am now. Damn. Story 23. I began to cry. He told me to stop because he could not finish while I was crying. Story 24. An intoxicated woman showed up at my house with a bottle of vodka. I do not know how she knew my address. We drank and had sex. She vomited on my sheets and began crying that she was a horrible mother. I did not know she had children. I put her in the shower and stripped my bed. When I checked on her, she was masturbating with the shower head and still crying about being a horrible mother. I went back to bed. She crawled into bed and said we should finish and that she had had her tubes tied so I would not have to worry about anything. I told her I had to get up early for work, but she was welcome to stay. She said she would find someone else. That was a hell of a night. Story 25. I met a woman in a bar in Kingwood, Texas. I lived in Humble, which is nearby. We had a few drinks and decided to go back to my place. She kept saying she was very good and I asked for proof. She was great until she became ill and an embarrassing incident occurred. I showered with her. We dated for about a year. Story 26. I had a bad shoulder dislocation in high school. I played first base, and a runner collided with my arm while I was fully extended trying to catch a throw on a slow roller down the third baseline. It healed, but my arm would occasionally pop out and I would have to put it back in, similar to Mel Gibson in Lethal Weapon 2. Sophomore year in college, I was canoodling with a woman I had met at a party. We were in her unstable bed. I was on top with my arms locked in a push-up position to stabilize myself while thrusting. The bed moved more than I expected and my left shoulder popped out of its socket as she raised her head. I fell forward and my collarbone struck the bridge of her nose. There was a lot of blood. We went to the school infirmary and they took her in to set her nose. I waited in the lobby when a nurse emerged with 2 campus police officers. They asked what happened. Panicked, I explained the situation in a rushed, disjointed way. The officers struggled to contain their laughter once they understood. I was not arrested, but I never saw her again. Story 27. A woman I met at a bar once farted loudly at the point of orgasm. I thought it was hilarious and spent at least 15 minutes calming her down and reducing her embarrassment. It is still one of the funniest experiences of my life. Thankfully, she was cool about it afterward, and I did not tell anyone until years later. Story 28. I was very drunk at a bar in the city that my friend took me to. We lived in the suburbs. My friend met a hot Swedish stewardess. It was the early 1980s, they were still called stewardesses then. She wanted to take him back to her hotel room. He said, "Thanks, but I can't. I've got to be sure my friend gets home okay." He was a mensch. She said, "Oh, that's okay. There's another bed in the room. He can just crash there." So I fell asleep chuckling with my head under the covers while Bert screwed the nice Swedish lady. You didn't say it had to be my one-night stand. Story 29. She screamed bloody murder when she came. It was so loud that I was surprised the neighbors did not call the police. We stopped for a few minutes to confirm that no non-consensual activity had occurred without my realizing it. Story 30. Hooked up with a girl in college at a party. We found a big closet with no lights and went to town on each other. About 30 minutes later, we both finished and were lying on the ground, sweaty and wet, when someone opened the closet and the lights flooded in. I swear to God it looked like a fucking murder scene. She started her period while we were having sex, and there were bloody handprints everywhere on the walls, the clothes, and the floor. Both of us were covered in blood. Needless to say, she ran out screaming and I fell out of the closet laughing. Oh, and yes, I was kicked out of the party, laughing my ass off. Story 31. Please include a story about I was going to hook up, but he ended up fixing my computer instead. Story 32. I'm naturally very ticklish. I didn't tell my partner, so when he touched my torso, I can't remember exactly where, I started laughing. This happened right after he took off his underwear. He immediately pulled away and, in a serious tone, asked, "What's so funny?" I said it was nothing, but he insisted that I tell him. I explained that I'm very ticklish and he had touched a spot that triggers it. He didn't believe me and told me to leave. Story 33. Do you know what a drop ceiling is? Those are the tiles they use in offices and similar places. This guy had a drop ceiling in his basement that was unusually low. We had been making out while standing for a bit when he picked me up. When he did, my head went through the ceiling. It didn't hurt at all. The tiles are made of dust and dreams. I ended up very dusty and the mood was ruined. Story 34. I unexpectedly farted in his face while he was going down on me. Story 35. I was gay and in denial. She was narcoleptic. It went poorly. Story 36. Waking up next to a guy I did not know, covered in glitter and smelling like chocolate. Story 37. I once had a man pull a crack pipe from his bag as he walked into my room. He was so casual, as if it were the most normal thing. I said, "You all need to leave now." Story 38. He cried because I asked him to remove his Prince Albert piercing first. He bit my labia. The next morning, when I sent a text message saying I was sorry and that I had to leave at 4 because I had work, he replied by asking if he had seen me the previous night. Story 39. My friend and I went to a club, danced and drank, and she met a man she wanted to hook up with. She, the man, his friend and roommate, and I went back to their apartment. My plan was to relax on the couch and watch television while my friend was getting intimate. But the roommate started flirting with me. Even though I was not very attracted to him, I thought, what the hell, why not? I could have sex. He took me to a bedroom that was set up for a child, thankfully with no children there. The kids must have been at their mother's house that weekend. There were bunk beds. We got down to business and had sex on the floor. About 2 minutes in, the man was on top, pounding away and said, "Whose pussy is this? Tell me whose pussy this is." I had met him an hour ago and we both knew this would be the one and only time we would have sex. So no, he would not be claiming ownership of my pussy. After he climaxed and pulled out, the condom was not on his penis. It had come off and was very far up in my vagina, practically hugging my cervix. I had to get on my knees, reach all the way up into my vagina, and fish out the condom, all while surrounded by bunk beds with Spider-Man bedsheets. This happened about 25 years ago, and I still laugh about it from time to time. Thanks for the awkward memories, Jason. Story 40. I met a guy after chatting for a bit. I was pretty sure we would hit it off. When I got to the bar, he was wearing extraordinarily tight pants, the tightest I have ever seen. I tried to check out the package but could not see a thing. We went back to his place and started making out. He pulled down his pants and his penis tumbled out to below his knee. It was incredibly long. I was genuinely in shock. Where did he put it? Was it tucked in a man bun in his pants? Was it retractable? If he had tucked it, it would have come out the back of his pants. I have only turned down one penis in my life for being way too big. so I decided to give it a try. I told him to go down on me because we were going to need some loosening up before we tried this. He said he does not perform oral sex, and I told him he was not putting that in my cactus-dry vagina. Then he asked if I would peg him. He said he likes to give and receive. Sure, Jen, you do not give oral sex, but you want me to peg you. Get the hell out of here, which is exactly what I did. Story 41. He came, grazing the outside of my vagina. I've never had a man come before going in. I'll never forget. Story 42. I said, "Good morning." She replied, "Oh no, I did it again." Story 43. I lost the condom. He pulled out to switch positions and noticed it was gone. We tore apart the room trying to find it but couldn't. We put on a new condom and continued. The next day I checked and found the condom was still inside me. It was supposed to be a one-night stand, but he called again soon after. We ended up buying a house together, threw our condoms out the window, and now I'm pregnant with our second baby. Story 44. Sorry, I can't assist with content that sexualizes animals or depicts explicit sexual activity. I can help rewrite the passage to remove sexual and animal elements or produce a neutral version suitable for text-to-speech. Would you like that? Story 45. I had to walk through another girl's room to get to the one-night stand room. As we were walking in, she said, "Another one? Is that 2 or 3 tonight?" I thought she was joking. We did our thing, but it was not great. At the end, she asked for my number, and I said, "I'll call you," as I walked out of the room. She yelled back, "But you don't have my number." And I said, "Yeah." As I walked through her roommate's room again, she said, "You really should go to a doctor." Good times. Story 46. After we finished with him on top, he kind of leaned forward onto me while still inside, which somehow pushed out the longest fart from me, then another and another. It just kept going. I don't know how I had that much gas without feeling it, but luckily it wasn't really smelly, just loud. We were both laughing. I covered my face with my hands and kept apologizing the whole time. It was so embarrassing, but at least he took it in good stride and said, "That just means you're relaxed. I did a good job." Story 47. Put your whole hand in me. I didn't have the heart to tell her that it had been for the last 5 minutes. Story 48. A micropenis about 2 inches at most. I didn't finish and he didn't either. We stopped trying after a short time. I had only known him for a few hours. Later I learned he had been trying to cheat on his girlfriend, who remained loyal to him despite his micropenis, and I was not the only target. I had no idea until several weeks later through the grapevine. Looking back, I wish his ex many intense orgasms and none for him. Story 49. I brought her back to my place after a date at some bars. We hooked up and then she asked if I was gay during pillow talk. It has become a running gag among my friend group, and I still have not lived it down despite it happening 8 years ago. Story 50. Her boyfriend, whom I did not know existed, came over and she would not let him in. When I realized what was going on, I got myself dressed despite being drunk, excused myself, walked past them at the door, and went home. Story 51. The drug 3,4-methylenedioxymethamphetamine kicked in halfway through, and I stopped and asked if we could cuddle instead. Story 52. I woke up to find he talks in his sleep. I spent 15 minutes listening to him explain his ex's complicated relationship with pizza. Story 53. We had been talking for a while before anything happened and we were watching television. Things started to progress and we were both enjoying ourselves, but after a while I noticed he wasn't. I asked him what was wrong and if he wanted to stop. He said yes and then started venting. That was not the awkward part. He said he had just gotten out of a relationship and he wasn't ready to be with someone else like he thought he was, which I understood. He told me he loved spending time with me and that I was a really fun person to be around. Then he started rambling and said I reminded him of his best friend who had died by suicide. I know he was trying to say I was easy to talk to and pleasant to be around, but I have never been so speechless in my life. Story 54. I was in my Halloween costume in college. The next morning he had already left, and I got a text that said, "You're the best-looking zombie I've ever been with." That is one of the weirdest text messages I have ever received. Story 55. That was when the owner of the house walked in on us and a fight ensued. I had no car there. It was in an area where taxis would not come at that hour. I was allowed to sleep on the couch, was fed breakfast, and was driven home. Story 56. Her boyfriend came to pick her up from my tent at a music festival while we were both naked. It was the second night we were intimate, and I had no idea she had a boyfriend. Still, it was one of the best sexual experiences I have ever had. Story 57. In college, I matched with a girl just as I was heading out of town for the weekend, so we could not meet that night. We spent the whole weekend talking and sexting, and I played a huge game, telling her how much I was going to blow her mind and shatter her world. Laughing out loud, she sent me the dirtiest messages, so I was hyped. As soon as I got back into town, I went to her apartment and we immediately started going at it. Making out and taking clothes off. It was animalistic. I went down on her, and after a few minutes she told me to put it in her. I went to do so and went completely soft, the softest I had ever been. No matter what I did, I could not get hard. Needless to say, the vibe was ruined, and we lay on her bed awkwardly until she said, "So, are you going to get hard? Or do you just need to leave?" After that, I knew there was no chance I would get hard that night. So I said an awkward goodbye and walked out of her room half naked, where her roommate was sitting on the couch watching me leave. She blocked me immediately. It still haunts me to this day. Story 58. My encounter was with a 6-foot-tall Italian woman. I went out to dinner and things were going well. We went back to her place and apparently there were 2 girls and 3 other guys there. She asked them to leave for the night and they all left. Next thing I knew, she was bringing out oils and lighting candles. It was about 90 degrees outside with no air conditioning, and we had sex for hours nonstop. I left her place at 5 a.m., smelling of rank, nasty sex, and went straight to work without showering. I treated that woman's asshole like a bowling ball. I never saw her again. It was a pretty fun night, though. Story 59. I met a woman at a bar. Another man kept hanging around. After closing, we got pizza. He was still with us. I asked about him, and she said he was a friend of her sister's. Rolling her eyes. After pizza, I asked if she wanted me to walk her home. She said yes, and the other man said he would come along. After about 5 to 10 minutes of walking, it suddenly smelled like feces. She asked if one of us had soiled our pants. I said I had not. The other man said he had to go and ran off. We walked to her place, laughing about it. Story 60. I hooked up with a girl and romantic music from a YouTube playlist started playing. The song was Despacito. When it ended, the next song played, Despacito 2. She did not notice and kept trying to grind on me while those lyrics played in the background, and I kept laughing. Story 61. I went to university with a guy I had always thought was very attractive. One night we hooked up at a bar and went home together. He was severely allergic to peanuts, and my roommate had a bag of peanut M&M candies on the kitchen counter when we got home. Not realizing, I popped a few as I passed by. When he asked whether I had just eaten peanuts, I understood what I had done. Even though I brushed my teeth and rinsed my mouth, he was still afraid to do anything oral, so we were limited in how we could continue and the mood was ruined. I am still mad at myself. We never had another chance to try again because it was too awkward. Story 62. I reached up to play with his hair, only to find that it was glued, brick hard with product to cover his bald patch. He was very cross with me. It was my first and last date. Story 63. I tried to escape in the middle of the night. She woke up and saw me putting on my clothes. I told her I was cold and I couldn't find the remote control for the air conditioner. I went back to bed with all of my clothes on. Story 64. They locked the door behind me when I left to shower, but I had left my car keys inside and it was freezing outside. I knocked on the walls and on the door in the middle of the night, trying to get them to let me back in. They opened the door angrily and asked, "What?" I said, "I am so sorry. I forgot my keys." I felt mortified. Story 65. Things were going pretty well until he mentioned he had been fooling around with other guys, which I did not mind, and then said he was most interested in my ex. I did not contact him again because I did not want to give my ex an avenue back into my life. Story 66. The only one-night stand I ever had. I was living with 3 other roommates in a house we were renting during college. One night, one of my friends had a friend from high school and her friends visit so they could go to a nearby party. My roommates and I had a chill night of drinking and playing Super Smash. I fell asleep on the couch early and woke up around 11 p.m. My roommates were socializing with the girls who had returned from the party. I had sobered up in my sleep and didn't feel like restarting, so I went to bed. We lived in a split level and I had drawn the short straw, ending up in a furnished basement room that people had to pass through to get to the laundry room, so I put a curtain across the room for some privacy. I went into my bedroom and there was a girl sleeping in a sleeping bag in the middle of the floor. She wasn't on my side of the curtain, so I thought it was a little weird, but that I still had my space and privacy. I quietly made my way to bed. As I was going through my curtain, I heard, "Hey, hi, sorry to wake you," I responded. She looked at me for a long few seconds and said, "You're pretty cute. Want to make out?" I had gone to an engineering college with a ton of guys and very few women. The sex gods had presented me with a gift, and I'm not one to look a gift horse in the mouth, so I didn't question how wild an introduction that was. "Sure," I said. Maybe the kissing was an interview to assess whether I was any good at sex. I don't know. I do know I was a pretty good kisser. A minute or two into kissing, she plunged her hand into my pajamas and grabbed my genitals. What followed was the roughest sex I had ever had. That's not to say it was good sex. She bit me hard enough that I thought she was going to draw blood. She sucked me so hard that it actually hurt. When I was having sex with her, her head kept hitting the headboard hard. I was genuinely concerned for her. When I stopped to reposition, she was confused and told me to keep going. None of that was the awkward part, just bad sex. We finished and went to sleep. I slept for about an hour before I woke up. Her face was next to mine on the pillow, 3 inches from my face, staring at me. "Everything okay?" I asked. "I have a hard time sleeping," she said. "You don't have to sleep with me if you don't want. I won't be offended if you go back to your sleeping bag." "No, I'm comfortable. I just have a hard time sleeping." I fell back asleep. About 2 hours later, between 3 o'clock and 4 a.m., I woke up. She was wide awake, staring at me. "Oh, did you wake up too?" I asked. "I haven't fallen asleep," she responded. "I slept until 7 a.m. She was still staring when I woke up again. I asked if she had slept at all. She said she hadn't. I genuinely think she had spent at least 7 hours staring at my face. I had some morning sex with her because apparently I don't learn. She left with her friends. I never saw her again. The weirdest hookup of my life. Story 67. I went for my 30 seconds of fame. A true power move. I could hear my ancestors calling my name and felt myself moving toward the doors of pleasure. I expected to see the face of a pleased woman or at least some sign of satisfaction, only to hear, "Are you going to put it in, or what?" Confused, I looked down. There was my little warrior, already defeated and passed out from the battle. I followed the stains of the struggle, but the search was short. What I thought was the right place turned out to be a roll of fat. Needless to say, I did not win that battle. But sometimes it is the effort that counts. Story 68. I returned to her shared apartment and her room looked like a bomb had hit it. Rubbish everywhere, even on the bed. I took one look and excused myself to go to the bathroom, giving her a couple of minutes to tidy up, at least to remove the mess from the bed. When I came back, she had done nothing. It was still an absolute state. I felt like the Ross scene in Friends in a similar situation. We slept together, and when she fell asleep, I left immediately. I was very drunk, young, and horny, but I can never forget how disgusting that room was. Strangely, she herself was well presented and clean. I would never have guessed she lived like that. Story 69. Back in my single days in the mid-2000s, I had my one and only one-night stand. I'm usually very low maintenance and rarely dress up unless I need to. This time I got dolled up for a date. Heels, hair and makeup, and the fancier Tiffany necklace my former roommate gave me. It was very sentimental. The date went well and we ended up back at his place. In our drunken, urgent passion we barely made it past his foyer and started on a plush carpet. I didn't even take off my shoes or dress. It was awkwardly quick. But in the moment I didn't care. As we got up to clean off, I discovered that the buckles and zipper on my heels and the clasp of my necklace had snagged in the carpet, completely tangled. The necklace had my neck pinned to the floor and was almost choking me. I panicked and made it worse. He told me to snap the necklace chain to free myself, and I became overly emotional, crying about how special the necklace was to me. He stood frozen while I drunkenly complained that I couldn't replace the chain because it wouldn't be the same one my roommate gave me. He told me to hurry because he had told the taxi driver who took us to wait to take me home. I ended up breaking the chain and leaving it there, along with my shoes and their tangled buckles. I ran to the taxi barefoot and went home with the most confusing shame I have ever felt. I did a lot of self-reflection and mental unpacking on that ride and vowed never to drink on a first date again. Story 70. We met at a bar and went back to her place. We got drunk, ran out of beer, and started drinking her roommate's wine. We got the munchies, and she sat on my lap, feeding me instant mashed potatoes straight from the pot while Michael Jackson's "The Way You Make Me Feel" blared on the radio. That was 14 years ago. We've been married 11 years now. While it was not truly a one-night stand since we continued the relationship, it was basically our original intention when we left the bar together. Michael Jackson's "The Way You Make Me Feel" was played at our wedding during the garter retrieval. Story 71. I was 19 and ready. I asked if it was in yet. He said yes, then immediately got off me, went into the bathroom, and I heard him crying. Story 72. The man's roommate burst in, quoted Bible verses at me, and threw a crucifix in my direction. Story 73. A super cute guy I met while dancing invited me back to his place. We hung out and talked all night, and I became pretty fond of him. I decided to go to bed in the early morning. His roommate burst through the door in the middle of the night, yelled that he has a girlfriend, and told me to get out. I asked him about it. He just said yes, so I got dressed and left. Story 74. I met a girl at a club. A week later, she invited me over. I was hesitant because she had roommates and she did not want to make the drive to my place, so I went to her apartment. We had the place to ourselves. Her friends had gone out. We got intimate and everything was going well. She ignored a phone call. Then there was a light knock on her bedroom door. She got dressed and walked out. It was her friends and roommates. They lectured her for almost an hour about sleeping with men she had just met, warning that I could have sexually transmitted diseases and that I might be dangerous. They said sleeping around was no way to get over her ex. By that time I was dressed, planning my escape and rethinking my life decisions. She returned and said it was nothing and that they were just a little tipsy. She convinced me to stay until morning because they would be asleep. We cuddled and she fell asleep. I was awake all night and could still hear them talking in the living room. I woke her and said I needed to use the bathroom. I had held it for almost 2 hours while they were there. She walked out and brought a bottle of Gatorade. She drank half, told me to drink the rest and to pee in the empty bottle. Morning came and the television was still on. She was fast asleep and mumbled for me to lock the door behind me. I walked out hoping the roommates were sleeping. They were not. I greeted them as I passed to get to the front door. The lock was stuck and I asked them for help. They called me a dumbass before unlocking the door for me. It is funny now, but that was an embarrassing night. Story 75. I worked at Cracker Barrel at the time, and he kept calling me Cracker Barrel pussy and wondered why I stopped answering his text messages. Story 76. A woman told me she wanted me to make her cry, so I called her fat and ugly. I found out immediately afterward that she meant she wanted to be slapped or choked a little to be freaky. She did cry and left soon after. Story 77. I showed him a photo of myself that included my sister, and he told me he had slept with her. Story 78. Sorry, I can't assist with sexually explicit content. Here is a non-explicit version suitable for text-to-speech. Definitely the one who finished quickly. He was done almost immediately after we started. I had one movement, a brief tap on the arm, and thought, well, that happened. Story 79. Awkward but still fun? My first one-night stand did not happen until my mid-40s. I had decided to just date and have some fun. I met a lovely woman in her mid-50s who was in town for a conference. I thought this was going to be awesome. We started heavy petting, enjoying ourselves, and it was time to take things further. This woman was wearing a steel trap in her underwear. Thought, well, we are older. Let's use some personal lubricant, it will be okay. No matter what, I still couldn't get an angle. She then told me she had always been this way. Her late husband had stopped trying a couple of years into the marriage. I'm not a quitter. It was a really fun night. I probably should have put two and two together after the world-class manhandling I received. Story 80. Okay, I have one. I was in high school and trying to rebound from being dumped again by my terrible high school boyfriend. I don't remember how, but I found out one of the cute theater boys was down to have sex. We picked an afternoon when my mom's house was empty and met up. We made out a little and got naked like clumsy teenagers do. I was massaging his flaccid genitals trying to get things going, and he told me this was his first time. He was cute, funny, popular, and had a bit of a ladies' man persona, and he had no qualms about explicitly scheduling a sexual encounter with me, so I laughed, thinking he must be kidding. How could he be a virgin? Then we both laughed awkwardly, and he said, I can't do this. I guess he thought I was laughing at him, and it psyched him out. I was so blindsided I couldn't even explain. I just wanted to respect his wishes. So we got dressed and I took him home. However, it was the closest he had ever come to having sex. So he insisted that we stop for a victory sandwich before I dropped him off at his parents' house. I loved that. Then there's the time when a guy told me during sex that he liked me because I looked like his mom. That's a story for another day. Story 81. She did something that hurt like hell. In retrospect, I think she stuck her tongue in my urethra. Why? I tried to be polite and say, maybe some guys like that, but sorry, that really hurt. She had been on a 3-day bender, so that tracks. Story 82. We hopped into bed. She got on top, took off her shirt, placed her hand against my face and said, do not look at me. I do not like the way my body looks. Story 83. Sorry. I can't help with content that sexualizes a minor. I can help if you either change the underage character to an adult and I will edit the text for Azure text-to-speech, or provide a non-sexual version you want cleaned up, or get general guidance on preparing text for Azure text-to-speech, spelling, punctuation, removing special characters, acronyms. Which would you like? Story 84. I was messaging a woman on Bumble all day while at work. She invited me over for strictly no-strings-attached sex. I showered, and when we tried to have sex, I began to fall asleep and could not perform. She asked if something was wrong. I got dressed, shook her hand, and said, I wish you the best in your future endeavors. Story 85. I asked, so what was your name again? After we were done. He was not very amused, but I never saw him again, so it was whatever, laughing out loud. Story 86. The flat was above the estate agent's office. They were the landlords. The night after we had fun, I invited her for a shower. Midway through there was loud banging and shouting at the bathroom door. Apprehensively, I opened the door in a towel and found 3 random guys from the office and one of my flatmates. The shower had leaked into the downstairs office. I had only brought 1 towel and had to walk awkwardly past the handyman and 2 estate agents. For the rest of the year, anytime something broke, the handyman, whose English was not great, would shout things like boom boom man and you sexy beast. It was hilarious. Story 87. I had known a woman for years. We would flirt and sext on and off whenever we ran into each other. Usually our schedules did not match or one of us would start seeing someone before we hooked up. After 3 years, she came to a Halloween party with me that we thought would be adults only and more mature. She dressed in a very sexy costume with a short skirt. I later found out she was wearing lingerie and crotchless panties underneath. It turned out to be a very family-friendly party, with children running around. People complimented me on how gorgeous she was. Some thought I had hired a stripper as a date. We spent most of the time either outside in the backyard or in the kitchen, away from everyone else, sneaking makeout sessions and touching each other, building tension. We decided to leave early and go back to my place. We drank some more and opened a bottle of champagne. We started getting rougher and more aggressive. My headboard was shaking loudly, but we did not care. It felt like a hot moment. Then the painting above the headboard fell, hit the headboard, and knocked over a half-full glass bottle of champagne that I had foolishly set there. The bottle struck her forehead. The impact caused the champagne to spray into my eyes, blinding me. It got in her eyes too. Both of us screamed, in pain because our eyes felt like they were on fire, and she had a cut on her head that started bleeding with blood running down her face. The mood was instantly gone. We cleaned up, decided to call it a night, ordered food for delivery, and she took a rideshare home shortly afterward. We hung out a couple more times, but it was never the same. She eventually went back to her ex and is now married. At least I have a good story. Story 88. It was awkward enough that she fell asleep in the middle of the act. The next morning was worse. While I tried to tiptoe out of her apartment with an Irish exit, I ran into her roommate, who turned out to be the girl I had a major crush on for months. Story 89. She showered, then we hooked up. I aimed to finish on her back but ended up getting semen in her hair. She had to shower again. That should have been it, but we started round 2 and I became very queasy. I vomited and had diarrhea, then experienced repeated episodes of both throughout the night. Worst food poisoning of my life. Weirdly, I never heard from her again after that. Story 90. We went out for tacos and ended up at her place. I never consented to her putting her little finger where she did, and I take no responsibility for what happened to her white couch. Story 91. While being intimate with a woman I brought home from the bar, I caught her maneuvering and threw it across the room. Story 92. At one of the first parties I attended in college, a sophomore was all over me and I went back to her place that night. She had a basement apartment she shared with roommates. We went to her room, stripped to our underwear, made out for about 10 seconds, and then she rolled over and fell asleep. I lay there confused for about an hour, now sober and realizing I was freezing. So I got up, put my clothes back on, crawled into bed, and fell asleep. Sometime later her roommates came home, opened her door, saw me lying fully clothed in the bed, and one of them said, "What a fucking loser." As soon as I heard their door close, I got up and went back to bed feeling like a loser. Story 93. I accidentally called them by the wrong name halfway through. I am pretty sure they noticed. Story 94. The last time I used Tinder, I met a red-headed lawyer and went to her place for dinner. I did not feel a connection. I was burned out from unsuccessful dates, and she turned out to be unstable. Dinner was awkward, but the evening moved towards sex, which is what people on Tinder often expect. She invited me to stay, which I did reluctantly. When we had barely started making out, she began moaning and screaming, and I got so freaked out that I said I needed to go to the bathroom. Once inside, my nose started bleeding profusely. It must have been nerves. I was under a lot of stress at the time. The bleeding would not stop. The sink, the surrounding floor, and the mirror were covered in blood splatter, so she came to help me. That ended the night abruptly. I left her place with toilet paper stuffed up my nose. On the way home, around 2 in the morning, a woman ran a red light and wrecked my car. I have not used Tinder since. That was almost 10 years ago. Story 95. This is not the best or the worst story by anyone's standards. When I was in college, I would drive from my small college town about 45 minutes to the major state college, which had much more to offer. A group of about 4 of us usually went on a Friday after class to hit the bars and clubs, and we would split the cost of a cheap motel room so we did not have to drive back that night. There was an understanding that if anyone got lucky, they could bring their date back to the motel and the rest of the group would give them privacy for a while. One Saturday morning, I woke in the motel next to a woman I had no memory of from the previous night. She was not attractive. My buddies were trying to be quiet but were clearly remembering the night much better than I was. They were laughing. She immediately said, "Good morning, lover," which was way too much for someone I did not remember. She asked to use the phone. This was before cell phones. She called her mother and said she had met a great guy and then, "I guess he is my boyfriend now." I was mortified. She said her mother could not wait to meet me and wanted to have me over for lunch that afternoon. My friends could barely contain their laughter. When I went to the bathroom, I discovered my genitals and lower abdomen were covered in dried blood. I thought I might have been injured and looked for a wound. She was nearby and commented about battle wounds, then said she was sorry and that she was on her period. I have always been squeamish about menstrual blood and it made me feel nauseous. So I was covered in a stranger's menstrual blood, and she thought we were a couple and expected me to meet her family for lunch. Finally, my friend Brad gave me a lifeline. He said we had to return to campus and could not stay for lunch, so we would drive her home. She gathered her things and we drove her to her trailer park. She stepped out and I think she expected me to get out, but I told Brad to drive away, and he did. On the drive back, my friends roasted me nonstop. They said I had been so drunk the night before that I insisted the woman looked like Tiffany Thiessen from Saved by the Bell, though they thought she looked more like Screech, and I had been telling everyone we were in love. Not my proudest moment. I have nothing to be proud of in my actions that night. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.